On July 3rd, 1775, George Washington rides out in front of the American troops gathered at Cambridge Common in Massachusetts and draws his sword, formally taking command of the Continental Army. Washington, a prominent Virginia planter and veteran of the French and Indian War, had been appointed commander-in-chief by the Continental Congress 2 weeks before. In agreeing to serve the American colonies in their war for independence, he declined to accept payment for his services beyond reimbursement of future expenses. On July 3, 1863, during the Battle of Gettysburg in the American Civil War, Pickett's charge was ordered by Confederate General Robert E. Lee as part of his plan to break through Union lines and achieve a decisive victory in the North. The charge was named after Confederate Major General George Pickett, whose division took part in the attack. The assault targeted the center of the Union line on Cemetery Ridge, where Confederate commanders believed the defenses were weakest. To reach their objective, thousands of Confederate soldiers had to cross nearly a mile of open ground while exposed to intense Union artillery and rifle fire. With little natural cover, the advancing troops suffered devastating losses. Although some Confederates briefly reached the Union position and engaged in close combat, they were unable to break through. The attack ended in a crushing Confederate defeat, with more than half of the attacking force killed, wounded, or captured. Pickett's charge marked the climax of the Battle of Gettysburg, and its farthest point of advance is often referred to as the high-water mark of the Confederacy. The failed assault ended General Robert E. Lee's hopes of achieving a decisive victory on Northern soil, and forced his army to withdraw to Virginia. Over the years, the charge has become one of the most famous and frequently interpreted episodes of the American Civil War, particularly in Southern historical memory. 160 years ago, on July 3, 1866, during the Austro-Prussian War, the Battle of Königgrätz occurred near the Bohemian city of Hradec Králové and the village of Sadova, now in the Czech Republic, in which the Kingdom of Prussia defeated the Austrian Empire. The battle was the largest engagement of the Austro-Prussian War and the biggest battle fought anywhere in the world since the Battle of Leipzig. Prussia fielded about 285,000 soldiers, while Austria deployed roughly 240,000 troops on the Bohemian front. The Austrian army was led by Ludwig von Benedict, who accepted command despite having limited familiarity with both his forces and the local terrain. Prussia held several important advantages, including better trained troops, the tactical leadership of Helmuth von Moltke the Elder, the effective Dreyse needle gun, and the innovative military use of railroads to rapidly move forces. Although Prussian artillery played only a limited role, the First Army under Prince Frederick Karl of Prussia, supported by a Guards division from the Second Army, carried out the main attacks. During fierce fighting in the Schweidwald forests and around Chlon, the Prussian 7th Infantry Division and 1st Guards Infantry Division overwhelmed much of the Austrian center, destroying 38 of 49 infantry battalions from 4 Austrian corps. By about 3 p.m., the Austrian army began retreating before additional Prussian forces could fully envelop its flanks, securing a decisive Prussian victory. After the battle, the Königgrätzer Marsch was composed by Johann Gottfried Pfeifke in commemoration of the battle, and it became one of the most famous German military marches. On July 3, 1898, during the Spanish-American War, the Battle of Santiago de Cuba was fought between an American fleet led by William T. Sampson and Winfield Scott Schley and a Spanish fleet led by Pascual Cervera y Topete. A powerful American fleet of 4 battleships and 2 armored cruisers destroyed a smaller Spanish squadron of 4 armored cruisers and 2 destroyers. Every Spanish ship was lost, while the United States suffered no ship losses. The victory secured American control of the Cuban campaign and helped bring about Cuba's independence from Spanish rule. American leaders recognized that defeating the Spanish fleet in Cuba was essential to winning the conflict. A U.S. squadron commanded by Admirals William T. Sampson and Winfield Scott Schley was assigned to block and destroy the Spanish fleet. On July 3rd, the Spanish squadron attempted to break out of Santiago Harbor, but was quickly pursued by the superior American force. Outgunned and unable to escape, every Spanish vessel was sunk, while American casualties were limited to only 2 men killed or wounded. After the battle, U.S. sailors rescued 1,889 Spanish survivors, including Admiral Pascual Cervera y Topiti. The prisoners were treated respectfully, and Cervera earned admiration from many American officers for his conduct during and after the battle. Although the victory ensured the success of the U.S. campaign in Cuba, it also sparked a long-running debate over whether Sampson or Schley deserved greater credit for the triumph. The dispute eventually reached Theodore Roosevelt and remains one of the best-known controversies in U.S. naval history. 50 years ago, on July 3, 1976, the Entebbe raid was launched by the Sayeret Matkal, an elite special reconnaissance unit of the Israel Defense Forces from Israel, in response to the hijacking of an international civilian passenger flight, an Airbus A300 operated by Air France between the cities of Tel Aviv and Paris. During a stop in Athens, the airliner was hijacked by 4 terrorists, 2 from the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine External Operations, and 2 from the German revolutionary cells. They diverted the aircraft first to Libya and then to Uganda, where it landed at Entebbe International Airport. There, the terrorist hijackers received assistance from Ugandan leader Idi Amin. In response, Israel launched Operation Entebbe. Under the cover of darkness, Israeli transport aircraft carried about 100 commandos, more than 4,000 kilometers to Uganda. The rescue operation lasted roughly 90 minutes and succeeded in freeing 102 hostages. 3 hostages, Jean-Jacques Mimoni, a 19-year-old French immigrant to Israel, Pascal Cohen, 52, and Ida Borochevich, a 56-year-old Russian Jew who had emigrated to Israel, were killed during the operation. A 4th hostage, Dora Bloch, a 74-year-old Israeli who also held British citizenship, had been taken to a hospital in Kampala after becoming ill before the raid. Following the raid, she was murdered by Ugandan authorities under the orders of Idi Amin, and her body was dumped in the trunk of a car that had Ugandan intelligence services number plates. Her remains were recovered near a sugar plantation 20 miles east of Kampala in 1979, after the Uganda-Tanzania War ended Idi Amin's rule. Israel suffered 5 wounded soldiers and 1 killed, Yonatan Netanyahu, commander of the elite Sayeret Matkal unit and older brother of future Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. During the assault, Israeli forces killed all 7 terrorist hijackers and about 45 Ugandan soldiers, while also destroying 11 Ugandan MiG-17 and MiG-21 fighter aircraft. The mission also relied on assistance from neighboring Kenya. In the aftermath, Idi Amin issued orders for the Ugandan army to murder all Kenyans living in Uganda, resulting in the deaths of 245 Kenyan Ugandans and prompting thousands more to flee the country. On July 3, 1988, Iran Air Flight 655, an Airbus A300 B2-203 from Mehrabad International Airport, Tehran, Iran, to Dubai International Airport, Dubai, United Arab Emirates, with a stopover at Bandar Abbas International Airport in Bandar Abbas, Iran, was shot down by 2 surface-to-air missiles fired by a United States Navy warship, USS Vincennes, and crashed into the Strait of Hormuz near Keshem Island. All 290 passengers and crew members on board were killed, making it one of the deadliest airliner shootdowns of all time, the deadliest aviation incident involving an Airbus aircraft of any type, and the deadliest aviation incident in Iranian history. The shootdown occurred during the closing stages of the Iran-Iraq War. Shortly before the incident, the U.S. Navy guided missile cruiser USS Vincennes had entered Iranian territorial waters after one of its helicopters came under warning fire from Iranian speedboats. The circumstances surrounding the shootdown have remained the subject of disagreement between the United States and Iran. According to the U.S. government, the crew of Vincennes mistakenly identified the Airbus as an Iranian Grumman F-14 Tomcat, even though the airliner was transmitting civilian identification signals. U.S. officials also stated that repeated attempts were made to contact the aircraft on civilian and military emergency radio frequencies, but received no response. Because Bandar Abbas International Airport served both civilian and military flights, the delayed departure of Flight 655 contributed to the confusion. Iran rejected the American explanation, arguing that the aircraft was clearly a civilian airliner and that the United States had acted recklessly and violated international law. Some later analysis criticized the aggressive command style of Vincennes' captain, William C. Rogers III, while others pointed to broader problems involving communication, decision-making, and situational awareness aboard the ship. The shootdown drew widespread international criticism, particularly regarding the initial U.S. response. Although U.S. President Ronald Reagan expressed deep regret in a diplomatic message to Iran, the United States did not issue a formal apology. In 1996, the two countries settled the case before the International Court of Justice. As part of the agreement, the United States paid $61.8 million in compensation to the victims' families and provided 2 Airbus A300 aircraft to Iran Air, while continuing to deny legal responsibility for the incident. The crew on board the downed airliner consists of 38-year-old Captain Mohsen Rezaian, a U.S.-educated veteran pilot with 7,000 hours of flight time, including over 2,000 in the Airbus A300. The other 2 pilots, a 31-year-old first officer and a 33-year-old flight engineer, were never identified, unfortunately, but they had at least 2,000 flight hours. And on July 3, 2013, then President of Egypt, Mohamed Morsi, was overthrown by a coup d'etat led by Egyptian Army Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who led a coalition to remove Morsi from power and suspend the Egyptian constitution of 2012. The move came after an ultimatum that the government resolve its differences with protesters during widespread national protests. Morsi and several leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood were placed under house arrest, while Adli Mansour, the Chief Justice of Egypt's Supreme Constitutional Court, was appointed interim president. The announcement sparked demonstrations and violent clashes between supporters and opponents of Morsi across the country. International reactions were divided. Many Arab governments either supported the military's actions or remained neutral, while Qatar, Tunisia, and the Syrian National Council strongly condemned the removal of Morsi. The United States avoided officially describing the event as a coup, whereas several other countries expressed concern or criticized the military's actions. The African Union suspended Egypt because its rules prohibit governments that come to power through unconstitutional means. Supporters of Morsi continued to protest after his removal, but security forces eventually dispersed 2 large pro-Morsi sit-ins on August 14, 2013, in a violent operation that resulted in hundreds of deaths. Casualty estimates vary considerably. The Muslim Brotherhood claimed that about 2,600 people were killed, while the Egyptian government reported 624 deaths. Human Rights Watch documented at least 904 deaths and described the crackdown as one of the largest mass killings of demonstrators in a single day in recent history, concluding that it may have amounted to crimes against humanity. Well, that's all the history I have for today. If you like what you hear, don't forget to leave a comment down below and subscribe. And to those who are Israeli, never forget Yonatan Netanyahu for his actions in rescuing the hostages who were held by the terrorists in Entebbe, Uganda. If it weren't for his leadership and brave effort, the hostages would never be rescued and they would all be murdered under the terrorists' watch. God bless Israel, and God bless the Entebbe raid. That's all I have for today. I hope you all have a nice day and stay cool.